Hello, one and all, and welcome to today's Street Soccer United podcast with me, Keith Mabbott. I'm the founder and CEO of the Street Soccer Foundation. And on today's show, I've got the brilliant Simon Rogers, director of Be in the Zone. Simon, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. For the benefit of our listeners, our partners and supporters, and the young people that we help through the foundation, please give a brief introduction to yourself.
Yes, Keith, of course. Well, thank you very much, firstly, for having me here on this podcast. I know you do some amazing work with the Street Soccer Foundation. I'm a big fan of everything you're doing, so thank you for having me, first of all. And yes, as you say, I am director of Be in the Zone. What we do at Be in the Zone is we help them elite players that are wanting to be in the zone, access it whenever they want, so that they can maximise their performance and also fulfill their potential during their career.
Superb. So, what were you passionate about as a young boy growing up?
Yeah, I think that football is probably number one on that list. I just used to love playing football with my brother or, with my dad, and even my granddad was a big part in my experience playing football and watching football. So that was definitely something I was hugely passionate about as a young boy. But also, I used to really love trying to figure out how we work as human beings. I mean, it sounds strange as a young boy, but I used to be absolutely fascinated with how the human body works, how we work. So I don't know if you remember the How Your Body Works books. There was a series of these books that I think it was every month you'd get one of them. You'd learn one area of the body, and there were these little characters that could go inside your body, and they would explore how it worked, and you'd learn about a different area or a different system of your body. And you'd also get a little body part. And at each time, with each book, you'd put one body part together and you'd have this full scale model. So, yeah, so football and also just figuring out how we work, how we fit together. Those were two things that I was really interested with as a young boy.
So very much like me, and a lot of so young boys and girls, obviously football being the global number one sport. But how interesting that you having that passion about also how we work as human beings. I'm not even aware of that sort of book series you mentioned, How Your Body Works. I'll have to look that up. But in that then, in terms of your kind of interests and what you were looking at, obviously looking at football and how the sort of the body works and everything else, has that led to any kind of, as you've developed as a young sort of boy into being a young man, has that had any challenges that you've come across, or as you were growing up, did you have any real obstacles or challenges that you've had to overcome in your life, and how have you dealt with it?
Or I would say depression is probably the biggest thing that I've had to overcome. And to kind of set the context for my story with depression, I struggled with perfectionism when I was young, and we always have some degree of perfectionistic traits. For me, perfectionism is coming from a feeling of not really being enough, and then having this interface of not really showing up fully as you are, the person you are inside, that person is looking for ways that they can perform, please, and perfect things based on what they think other people want to see. And this is a trap that I got stuck in at a young age. And my granddad was also somebody he was just my best friend, to put it simply. I trusted him more than anybody, and he kind of saw through that kind of facade. It's somebody you can completely level with, be fully yourself with. That was my granddad for me. And when I was 17, he passed away after struggling with cancer for a number of years. And I really didn't have any other experience with death in my life before that that really hit me that hard. And so being trapped in that experience of that sadness, the loss, the grief of my granddad passing away, and not sharing that with anybody because of the perfectionistic traits, I really struggled to deal with that at the time. And I struggled along for another year, and then I went off to Holland to study when I was 18, and I really had to try and figure it out all on my own, by myself. It's not the wisest thing to do. It's not a smart way to approach it. I'd certainly recommend that anybody in a similar situation would reach out, would speak to people, would share how they're feeling, and that it unravels you will be able to grieve so much quicker and deal with the depression in a far more effective way. Um, but I would say that is the biggest challenge that I've ever had to overcome. Absolutely.
I'm really sorry to hear of the passing of your granddad when you were 17, Simon. And on a personal level, I really understand that and know how you feel. I was very, very close to my grandfather as well, and and he was there, sort of took me to all my games, watched me play all the time when I was a youngster, particularly when I was at Millwall, sort of taking me up to Millwall training sessions up in London, every week, week in, week out, and then coming to watch me all the time. So I really get that. But what you talked about there, sort of going through that depression and having that kind of striving for perfectionism, you're absolutely right. Based on what other people want to see, it's so often what we come across. Working with young people through the foundation. I think what you're talking about there is the key message is share with others to help any form of grieving that you might be going through or have been going through. I think you're right. It's about talking up, isn't it, and sharing those emotions, because it can be very difficult if you become insular and try to deal with the situation on your own, and particularly at such a young age and an impressionable age as well, at just 17, 18. But all power to you in terms of how you reflect on that. So in that regard, I mean, obviously from what happened then and then how you further developed, how did you get into what you now do?
Yeah, this is actually quite an interesting way, because actually it's quite a long road. I spent a lot of time working in lots of different other areas in building up skill sets to provide something that's unique, a unique way of working with mindset. So my experience is then going through understanding the body, and then integrating the mind in a little bit later, to really understand how we function, how we work. And as you know from my childhood, I was super interested, passionate about how we work as human beings, what drives us as human beings. So I started by studying physiotherapy, because that seemed like the biggest problem I could solve for people. If they had physical pain, that's something I thought, oh, it would be pretty cool if I could solve that for people, so that they could get on and enjoy playing football or whatever mattered to them. So I studied physiotherapy. I did that for 4 years, over in Holland, and amazing experience living in another country and learning a new language and getting looking at life through a different lens than just through what you learn from your own culture. And I learned so much through that. When I graduated, I became a lecturer, and I did that for 3 years. And the more I started to work with my clients, because I started working in private practice, I started to realize that to really get to the root cause of what was going on for them, I needed to understand so much more about the body than what I'd learned through physiotherapy. And I noticed that I was also coaching my clients so much more. So it wasn't a case of me fixing them with the techniques that I'd learned with my hands, or the exercises that would be given to stretch different joints or muscles, etc. It would be the changes that they could make in their life, in their lifestyle, and in their mind habits in order to solve it for good. But again, I wanted to understand and really piece together how the body worked, because I didn't really know much about how it worked inside from physiotherapy. So what I did is I learnt then over 5 years studying part-time while combining that with my full-time job, working in a private practice. And what I did is I studied osteopathy. Now, what that really taught me was how the body all linked together. So I would study for a whole weekend over 3 days. We'd just learn about the stomach, for example, and how that would fit together with the whole musculoskeletal part of your body. So we're talking about the muscles, joints, tendons, bones, and how that also fitted together with your nervous system, lymphatic system, all the other systems in your body. Ultimately, I wanted to get an overview. I wanted to understand, how do we work? How do certain problems arise, and how do we solve them? Not only just by patching them up, but solving them long term. So when I brought this insight all together, I started to realize some things are really, really simple. We just don't have in in the general public that knowledge to be able to piece things together. Now I could see it from an overview. I wanted to gift this information, this insight, and new ways of approaching your life, your body, and your life that would get you dramatically better results and solve things long term rather than just patching them up. So I did this in my practice when I moved back to the UK. Here I started a practice which is called Restore Your Body Now. And there I started to work with my clients by coaching them and helping them get over long-term back and neck complaints and other complaints that they were struggling with. And the key part to this, the thing that made the biggest difference, that made that massive shift and sustained it, was the work that I was doing on their mindset. Because however much they actually wanted to change and all the exercises they were doing and the things they were learning from me, if they couldn't get over the fact that they were developing, they were changing, they couldn't deal with that fear, they weren't going to change. They would actually self-sabotage and go back to the same pattern. So this was the biggest secret sauce, if you like, of the transformations that my clients were getting. So I thought, right, it was starting to become clearer for me that I wanted to do something more in the football industry, because I wanted to do something with a passion that I have, the love that I have for the football industry, for football in general. And I wanted to give back. I want to bring that back to, and it's a unique skill set that I wanted to share, because not only is it about the positive psychology, but it's really about embodying that change, embodying and feeling the processes that are happening in your body so that you can actually stay calm under constant change and dealing with fear ultimately. And this is what I really learnt, and this is what this is the part that really got me into what I do now.
That is a fantastic and interesting journey. You talk about building up your skill sets and wanting to work with the mind as well as what kind of through how the body works. And I think, where you talk about physiotherapy, I mean, going out to Holland as well. But that, what you mentioned about looking at life through a different lens is really interesting as a phrase. That's come up a few times, in discussions that I've had with a number of people. But I think you're absolutely right. It's different ways of looking at the same thing. And it's interesting again in terms of what you've said there, that how coaching came to the fore with those that you were supporting, and how you then sort of took that on and developed again yourself as an individual, and moved on to kind of looking at osteopathy and how it all links in. So what's really the most kind of fascinating thing to learn from all of what you've said there, though, not to be biased, but again, through the work that we do at Street Soccer, very much so, Simon, you're very much a valued part of our team in that sense. But that what you say about the biggest difference being made and achieved with your clients was with their mindset, and that, as you coin, being the secret sauce. And I think that's exactly it. Mindset is just everything. It's so fundamental to how we and what we deliver, for all of the programs that we do. Both in the academy and the schools program. And that's why we're immensely privileged to have you a part of the team and being a lead mentor in some of our work. So in terms of the work that you do at Be in the Zone, what would you say then are the key things a player would get from working with you?
Yeah, great question. So the key things that they would get is a resilience, and a resilience in a way that's not a resistance. So they can deal with all the things that are very disappointing, when an outcome isn't always the one that you want. Football is a team sport, so there are lots of different variables that are not in your control, but it gives them the best ability to control what they can control, and to do that to the absolute best of their ability, which includes being able to deal with any type of fear, so that they are performing at the highest level. They can push themselves to a point where they really can't get any more, but are also at the same time calm, which gives them ability to stay creative, to make the right decision in a key moment, that essentially means that they fulfill their potential and enjoy their career so much more because of that.
Absolutely brilliant. Really, I mean, certainly again on a personal, I mean, it comes back to me again, forgive me, but obviously when I was a footballer, I was at Mill, Gillingham and Charlton, and obviously as a young player wanting to make it, When I sort of lost out and missed out on my contract at Charlton, having got an injury, there is no question I would have benefited from that kind of coaching and support from someone like yourself. Having that resilience to be able to deal with a disappointment like that, and then look at what you can control. And focus on that. What you said there, Simon. Control what you can control, to then be able to hopefully fulfil your potential in other ways, and enjoy a different pathway, perhaps. And for me, that was something that would have obviously benefited me. Certainly, I'm sure I was fortunate, I guess, that I had some great people around me, family and friends. But obviously, it's a big deal, and it happens to so many young players all over the country. There are that clubs all throughout the pyramid. And then when they don't get their contract, a lot of them, really do struggle, and obviously they are vulnerable young adults. So I think you're absolutely right in what you say there, and being able to have that resilience about you is so important and valuable. So I mean, in terms of linking that in with the kind of mindset that you touched upon again earlier, how do you apply yourself the benefit of a growth mindset to you in your own daily routine?
Yeah, for me, a growth mindset is being in a space of development, opposed to a fixed mindset, being in a place of judgment. So what I mean by this is that, with a place of development, that you actually have an open mind to what is possible. So everybody can grow their abilities, and the opposite of that is obviously having the judgment that you believe that everybody's abilities are fixed, including maybe your own as well. So what I suppose I do on a daily basis is ensure that anything that I am going, I can't do that, or it's not possible, then I always ask the question of like, well, how could I? How could I do it? Or how could I be more resourceful in this situation? Because at times when we get grumpy, frustrated, annoyed, and we don't really know how that happened, it's because we've slipped into this fixed mindset. So it's for me always a challenge as soon as that happens to go like, how could I? And how could I be more resourceful to find a solution in this situation that I haven't yet found? So it's always applying that, in every kind of situation that I come to.
I really love the phrase you've come up with there, a place of development to sort of have your mind open to what's possible. That's where I'm going to grab that, Simon. I love that. But you're absolutely right. It's that, having that mindset of consistently telling yourself, what you can do, what you can control. And like you say, that trigger, I guess, if you come across yourself sort of saying, I can't do that, the word can't, have that as a trigger to kind of then change that into a how could I? And that's a really good bit of advice there for those that are listening, to have that consistency in your mind to be able to be open to what is possible rather than close it down and then kind of just accept what isn't. Reflecting on that, I mean, for your own self again, what are your ambitions for being in the zone, and going forward?
Yeah, well, something that I'm really excited about, a bigger vision than the work that I'm currently doing, is that I'm super passionate about what is possible when people see footballers as role models, and whether footballers like it or not is sometimes an extra burden that they've never chosen to have, but it's something that they can embrace. And when footballers do embrace being a role model, some amazing things have happened, particularly over the last couple of years. And I think that this is a huge place for growth, because there are millions of people watching footballers every single week. If they see them learning certain skills that are going to transform other people's lives, well, it lends an extra credibility to some of these skills that seem kind of quite intangible, or even almost esoteric, and gives them an ability to just go, well, let me try it. When I'm struggling with depression, or I'm struggling to just feel good, or even be more successful, or have a higher performance in any area of their life, whether it's in their job, or even just being the best possible person they can be, best possible dads they can be in their family. Well, I want to give people access to these skills, so that they can live the best possible life that they can live. And I think that football has a massive role to play in this. And so that's something that I'm super excited about in the future, and I'll do all I can to make that as easy and accessible to as many people as possible.
Simon, I love that. I mean, I do appreciate, as we all do, I'm sure. Occasionally you'll read something in the press, and footballers will get a bit of a rough ride, and sometimes they bring it upon themselves. But generally speaking, like you say, they are so influential. Footballers absolutely are role models. you know, and it is the case. They're influencers, and youngsters, many young people across the country look up to professional footballers, and certainly those at the sort of top echelons of the game. In the Premier League, for example. We see it again through street soccer. Whenever we link in with some of our Premier League sort of community trust and foundation partners, where maybe a player or two from the first team might pop over to meet the group, the whole room just completely engages, and just I mean, you're watching in front of you, aren't you? Lives being changed there and then. These are sort of lifetime memories being created, and I think if you get that opportunity where you can have the footballers themselves realise that and embrace it fully, there is, like you say, such an opportunity to have them impact other people's lives for the good. So that people can generally live the best possible life that they can live. So really all power to you again, and like I say, it's a real privilege to have you a part of the street soccer setup in what you do for us in terms of your advice and support and mentoring of the young people. And I guess that brings us to the final question. I can't believe we got there so quickly, but Simon, what we always do, as you know, is ask this: what is the best advice you've ever been given, and by who?
That's such a great question, and I have to say, it kind of comes back to the start when I said about my granddad being my best friend, and what he taught me to do is he taught me to believe in myself, and I think that's probably the best advice that anybody can have, and certainly for me, is to believe in yourself. Absolutely, just right from the core of you, that you have a belief of what you do and who you are, most importantly, matters. And I really believe that is true for absolutely everybody. But it's about you experiencing it yourself, and having that belief within you that you matter. So I'm very grateful for my granddad for really helping me with that and allowing me to experience that as true for me.
Ah, Simon, I mean, it's so obvious. Your granddad was obviously an incredible man, and what fantastic advice to end this brilliant podcast into today. Simply believe in yourself. What you do and who you are really does matter, and you must believe that implicitly. Simon, thank you so much indeed. You've been absolutely superb. Everyone, you've today here listened to the fantastic Simon Rogers, director of Be in the Zone. Please check the website out, get in touch with Simon through the foundation as well, and do tune in again next week for our next podcast interview.